Why did the alien at the end of Romulus almost look like an engineer but not completely? I'm going to give you the short answer and the long answer. The short answer is, like it was explained in Romulus, the black goo is the root of all life. The black goo in Romulus was extracted by a xenomorph by scientists that you saw at the start of the movie. The black goo is what created the engineers, and the engineers created us. So when you inject a human embryo with the black goo like Kay did, you get this weird human engineer xenomorph hybrid thingy. And that pretty much sums it up. But now for the more thorough, longer explanation. The engineers long ago lost their ability to reproduce and was on the brink of extinction. And they weren't really keen on dying, and they wanted to find a solution to their species to be able to live forever. So they went out and searched the cosmos, and in their search found what is believed to be the first facehugger. The engineers needed a sacrificial lamb, and so they chose an engineer who they refer to as the Chosen One. The Chosen One sacrificed himself, allowing the first facehugger to impregnate him, and out came the first deacon. This is not to be confused with the deacon who came out of the engineer at the end of Prometheus. That is a different deacon. The engineers honor the Chosen One who was willing to sacrifice himself for the salvation of their race. And they built a giant engineer head monument in his memory, which the humans discover in Prometheus. The first deacon was a sacred deity that the engineers worshipped. And at some point, the first deacon died. It's unclear how, but he did. And the engineers used the deacon's blood to seed new life forms, just like you saw at the beginning of the movie of Prometheus. This is presumably how humans were made. But in the attempt to create more engineers, they created us. We are a lesser form of the engineers. We are made in their image, but we're definitely not as cool. We are essentially a failed experiment, and we are not the perfect organism that they were trying to make. And just like the engineers, the humans started to play God, and then we created synthetics. We created androids, which is essentially a lesser version of humans. In an Alien Covenant, you see a synthetic named David who starts to play God himself. David tries to do what the engineers failed to do, which is create the perfect organism. He creates the xenomorph. Now, I realize what I just said is a very contentious statement amongst Alien fans. Alien fandom cannot agree on this. Half of the fandom believes that David did not create the xenomorph, that the engineers did, but I'm going with what I think Ridley Scott wants us to believe, which is that it was David who created them. But the xenomorph is basically Deacon, but just a lesser version of Deacon. The first Deacon is kind of thought to be like Ridley Scott's own version of Cthulhu. He's God. He's this almighty, all-powerful entity that the engineers worshipped. And David does successfully manage to create something that is made in the Deacon's image, but it's not quite. And then, of course, xenomorphs create facehuggers, but the facehuggers they make are a lesser version of the first facehugger that the engineers found that created the first Deacon. So as you see, this is a theme throughout the franchise. It's a vicious cycle where we keep creating what came before. We try to play God, but the thing that we make is made in the image of something, but it's a lesser version of what came before. What happens at the end of Alien Romulus is by using the black goo, they accidentally recreate an engineer, but it's a lesser version of an engineer. It's an engineer that isn't quite an engineer. Personally, I think where the franchise is going is I think David is attempting to resurrect God. He is going to continue to keep experimenting, keep trying to perfect the organism, the black goo, and eventually resurrect the first Deacon. And then we're going to have this kind of in-game level movie where Rain from Alien Romulus, the girl from Alien Covenant, and an aged Sigourney Weaver are all going to come together in one movie and basically fight God. Or, Ridley Scott's twisted version of God. And one of the reasons why I believe this is because Ridley Scott is obsessed with religious themes in his movies and putting a twist on them. But let me know in the comments where you think the franchise is going.